They were shooting at us from planes. So my mother had 6 kids, 6 years and younger with her, and it was too much for her. There were dead horses and people in the ditches, and she decided to leave the road and go through the fields because it was safer than to be on the roads. So she had to leave 4 of the children behind because she only has 2 hands. So she felt she could only take 2 children. So we got left behind, and we got taken to an orphanage in Berlin. And then we got put on a train to go, hopefully, to Switzerland. And my mother's sister found out about what had happened. And she then came behind enemy lines and pulled us out and reunited us with the family. I don't remember a lot of all of this, other than I never felt safe. It was not clear what you could depend on because people changed their mind. There was so much anxiety, and people were trying to figure out under huge stress, to make decisions of what was.
Welcome back to the Me&my Health Up podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today, you've just heard his voice. It's Udo Erasmus, who's been on the show before. We did the show, episode 141, Fats That Kill, Fats That Heal. So if you haven't listened to episode 141, I suggest you listen to it because today's a bit of a follow-on episode. It's on the search for harmony. Because in that episode, Udo talks about his journey as a child out of war-torn Poland and his discovery from that point on in terms of the search for harmony. And so I asked him at the end of that podcast, I said, what did you discover in your quest for harmony? And he said, that's another whole episode. So yes, we have Udo back on the show to actually share his story in terms of his quest for harmony. And it's a very enlightening story. I learned so much. I got so much insight from doing this podcast with Udo. So it's a must listen and tune in. A little bit about Udo for those that didn't listen to episode 141. So Udo's the founder of Udo's Choice and the author of the book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, which has sold over 250,000 copies. As an acclaimed author and speaker, Udo has an 8-step process that takes into consideration all elements of nature and human nature, including physical health, mental health, presence and awareness, life energy, and being in harmony with nature and humanity. And that's what we do today. We get in touch with humanity through Udo's quest and his story he shares around his quest for harmony. Udo's background includes studies in biochemistry, genetics, biology, and nutrition, as well as a master's degree in counseling psychology. So without much further ado, I'd love to welcome you into the discussion I'm having with Udo Erasmus. Welcome back on the show, the Me&my Health Up podcast. How are you, Udo Erasmus?
I'm peachy keenly fine.
Awesome. We had such a great chat last time talking about fats, the good, the bad, the ugly. Really enjoyed that discussion. It was certainly very insightful. I learned a lot. And during that discussion, you talked about your journey as growing up as a refugee leaving Poland and war-torn Poland at the time. And you said it led you on a quest for harmony. And essentially over that quest for harmony, you've discovered something that I asked you if you could share. And you said, it'd be another whole episode.
I did indeed say that. I actually listened to the episode, and I can confirm that what you're saying is true.
So tell us about this, as a little boy. So maybe go back to that story, that where you were as a little boy and seeing the world broken around you and thinking this isn't the world I imagined, or this is in terms of what you thought as a little boy. But certainly if you could take us back there and we can build on it.
Yeah. So my parents came from Latvia and Estonia. They had German, Swedish background. And in 1938, Hitler and Stalin made a non-aggression pact. The idea was they weren't going to fight each other because the war was looming, right? They weren't going to fight each other. And in order to both sign on to that, they agreed that Latvia would go to the Soviet Union and a part of Poland would go to Germany. And what's interesting about it is there was nobody from Latvia or Germany at the meeting, or Poland at the meeting. So they just basically took it because they could, because they were big and they could. So my father, my parents, my father particularly, loved the Russian people because they're feeling people. They're articulate. They have emotions. And he liked that. And he hated the communists because they took everything away from everybody and it was all state-owned. And because he had German background, he decided to leave Latvia and they gave him a farm in Poland that belonged to a Polish guy. They took it away from him and gave it to my dad. And the Polish farmer was my father's farmhand. So he was working as a farmhand on his own farm. And that created some stuff. And so they sat down and said, look, my dad said, look, this is completely crazy. What's going on in the world is stupid crazy. Let's just run the farm together the best way we can. And then when this craziness is over, then we'll sort it out. So they worked together. And when the war ended, I was born on that stolen farm, basically. When the war ended, I was 2.5. It was winter. We were fleeing from Poland into Germany because we had German background, with the communists chasing us in tanks and trucks on dirt roads with no military presence, all horse-drawn hay wagons, mothers with young children trying to get the hell out of Poland. And the Allies, the good guys, were using us as target practice. They were shooting at us from planes. So my mother had 6 kids, 6 years and younger with her, and it was too much for her. There were dead horses and people in the ditches, and she decided to leave the road and go through the fields because it was safer than to be on the roads. So she had to leave 4 of the children behind because she only has 2 hands. So she felt she could only take 2 children. So we got left behind and we got taken to an orphanage in Berlin. And then we got put on a train to go hopefully to Switzerland. And my mother's sister found out about what had happened. And she then came behind enemy lines and pulled us out and reunited us with the family. I don't remember a lot of all of this other than I never felt safe. It was not clear what you could depend on because people changed their mind. There was so much anxiety and people were trying to figure out under huge stress, to make decisions of what was the best way to deal with things. And I remember being hungry and just remember noise, and I was very fearful. And so we ended up making it out. We were in Germany, and when I was 6 years old, I listened to adults in Germany have arguments, intense arguments about things that to me as a 6-year-old seemed pretty trivial. And it always made me feel uneasy. Like tension always made me feel uneasy. And so I thought, man, there must be a way that people can live in harmony. And this little cocky voice, I guess it was mine, said, I'm going to find out how. And that became my driver. I didn't think about it all the time incessantly, but it was always there. There must be a way that people can live in harmony, and I'm going to find out how. And because my life was pretty chaotic, I became pretty quiet inside, pretty inward, withdrawn. I loved books because books were safe. No bullets flying in a book about war, right? So it's safe. You can read about it and think it's pretty cool. It's not cool when the bullets are flying, right? I did a lot of reading. And when it came to education, I got into science because I wanted to understand how things work. Because when you don't know how things work, then you don't know how, you don't know what you need to do. And one of the big issues about science is predict and control. So if you know the nature of something, you can expect it to act according to its nature. So I got into science, and then I started to find physics and chemistry boring, and math, and I got into biological science to figure out how creatures work. If you want harmony, you probably need to know how creatures work. And then I got into psychology to figure out how thinking works, because if you want harmony, you probably need to know how thinking works. Then I got into medicine because it's called healthcare, because I wanted to know what health is, because I thought that if I knew what health is, I could help people. I literally needed to take them and turn them around in the direction of health and push them in that direction and get them better. But then you'd have to know what direction that would have to be. You'd have to know what health is. We only learn about disease in medicine. I asked the dean, what is health? He said, we don't know. We're working on it. And they're not working on it because they study disease. You don't study darkness to find out the nature of light. You study light. You want to know the nature of health, you need to study health. And so I quit medicine, got into biochemistry and genetics, because in biological sciences, you're actually studying health, but nobody told us that. But you're looking at the normal functioning of normal creatures in normal situations. And so I did that I got close to the master's degree in genetics eventually. And there was still something missing. So I left university. And then I got into, traveled some and read all kinds of, sat in on different classes in anthropology and sociology and social psychology, a little bit of theology, it's because I'm trying to find something. It's like, there was this feeling, I had this feeling in my chest, something is missing. And I'm trying to find out what it is. And I didn't know what the feeling was. And I didn't, but there's something, I'll know it. I'll recognize it when I get it, when I find it. But I don't know where it is and what it is, but I know I'll recognize it. So that's kind of like my childhood, my early adulthood. And I eventually, in my late 20s, decided that I wanted to know why people don't remember my grandfather, who hadn't been dead for 50 years, but they're still talking about these people from 2,000 years ago. Jesus and Buddha from 2,500, Ganesha 5,000 years ago. They're still talking about these people. Why are these people so memorable? There must have been something there. And so I decided I would find out and put some energy into finding out. And I came to the conclusion that I wanted to find out what it was that the masters felt. What was their experience that enabled them do the things they did and to say the things they did? And so to do that, I got the red letter edition of the Bible. This is a Bible where everything is in black ink except for what Jesus says. Everything Jesus says is in red ink. And I'm a kind of a focused guy. So you're like, just give me the good side I'm looking for. I don't care what Moses said. I don't care what, all of those guys said. What was the message? What was Jesus' message? What was the central message? Because I didn't know what it was. Most people don't. Most people call themselves Christians, actually live according to Moses, because Moses was a lawmaker. Jesus was a master. The masters only had one law. That was the law of love. Love your life, love your God, love your neighbor as yourself. That's just one way of putting it. I'm paraphrasing. Moses said, don't do this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do that and don't do that and don't. And then on top of his 10 commandments, we've made it a couple of thousand or a couple of 100,000 laws in different places around the world. Don't do this and here's the punishment, and don't break that law and here's the punishment. So we're always threatening people with our laws. And the masters were smarter than that. They said, you know what? If people don't follow the law of love, it doesn't matter how many laws you make. Whenever they feel like it, they'll just break them. So they said, why make more than one law? Because if you follow the law of love, you don't need any more laws, because you're not going to go and beat people up out of love. Well, some people say that you can, but that's BS, right? And if fundamentally, they just made that one law. So okay, well, that's cool. So then I put things that Jesus said to the test. And we were told you shouldn't do that. But I decided, I'm going to take a risk. And if what he's saying isn't true, I'm going to end up in trouble. And so I put it to the test, and I had a magical year. That was probably 2 years that I did that. It was magical. Now, all kinds of things happened that was like not in my control, but just would bail me out. It was really fun. And I was young enough and, cocky enough to want to do that. And then this group of people came up the coast from California to British Columbia. They called themselves the Jesus People's Army. And that should have been a warning to me, because armies was not a good word in my experiential vocabulary. But I missed that cue. So my assumption was, well, these guys must all be trying to figure out what I'm trying to figure out. And we'll get together and we'll share the stories of what we've experienced. And we'll all leave enriched by those stories. And we'll have all learned something. And then we'll all go on our way and continue our quest for the essence of the message or the truth or whatever you call it. So they had a coffee house, and they invited people to the coffee house. I walked into the coffee house. I sat down at a table. This guy swooped in next to me in a chair. I looked him in the eye, didn't introduce myself. I just looked him in the eye and I said, it must be possible to see God and live. Because we were told as kids, if you see God, you die. And I always thought that was like really strange. Wait a minute. This is supposed to be my father. This is the guy who loves me unconditionally. And if I look at him and see him, he kills me. Like, what's wrong with that picture, right? So I said that to him. It must be possible to see God and live. Well, he jumped out of the chair and his arms were flying and he yelled, screaming at the top of his head, "You're from the devil! You're from the Antichrist! Get out!" So I go slinking out of there, standing on the sidewalk in the dark. I said, well, I haven't seen God. Maybe I'm asking a question I shouldn't ask. And I became really insecure and really desperate and really confused. And my habit was, when I got confused in the city, because I did quite a bit of experimenting and testing systems and stuff. When I got too much of the city, I would go out in nature and clear my head. So off I went to clear my head on a beach on the west coast of Vancouver Island. I was the only person on the beach, beautiful, long, sandy beach. And all the logs on the beach, how the logs wash up. Somebody had draped plastic over some logs and made a little dwelling. And I said, I guess this is my hostel for the night, for the weekend. Went in, went to sleep. And in the middle of the night, I woke bolt upright from dead asleep. And there was this being made of light, standing on a little cloud made of light. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. Couldn't tell if it was old or young, but it was a human being made of light, embodying a message. No words, didn't know who it was, didn't have wings, so I figured it's not an angel. Embodied a message, and it didn't say the message. I put words to the message. I don't know how that works, because it's a very different kind of experience. And I didn't believe in this kind of stuff either. So the message I could put to what that being embodied was, I am come not to judge, but to love. I am come not to judge, but to love. And my desperation and that fear and that confusion instantly evaporated. I have never, ever had a question since that day. This was in 1970. Since that day, what was the essential message of the masters? Because they all had the same message. They said it in different ways, but there's the essential message. And then I started saying, well, who was that? I was like, was that Jesus? Was that Christ? Was that my spirit? Was that life? And it turns out those three are actually synonymous. Life and Christ and spirit and even solar energy are all synonymous. So the message of the masters to humanity is, I am come not to judge but to love. But that's also the message that life, the power within you, the energy within you, its message to your body. Your body is unconditionally loved and empowered by the flow of life energy through you. 24/7, 365, lifelong. Never goes on strike, never takes a day off, never complains about all the stupid things you do to yourself. It's just there, loving, 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 loving. That's pretty cool. Then the derivation is that, well, what is that energy? So we are solar gadgets. Human beings are solar gadgets. So how does that go? The sun radiates energy, and that energy is filtered through 93 million miles of space, and then it's filtered through the Earth's atmosphere, and then it's filtered by plants, which absorb some of it and don't absorb some of it. And in the plants, that fraction of solar energy is stored in bonds between excited electrons that then act to form that bond to make molecules. And some of those molecules are our food. And when we eat those molecules, they're absorbed into our cells, and into our cells, those bonds are broken, and that fraction of solar energy is released, and that's what we live on. And now we call it, when it's in our body, we call that life energy. What solar energy, or a fraction of solar energy, is life energy. And then what the masters talked about, they all did some kind of a stillness practice. So Jesus had 40 days in the desert. Buddha was meditating under the banyan tree, so they all had some way, and they all recommended stillness time in which you take your focus, which is always going out into the world to assess change, because you have to very quickly decide whatever's changing. Is it friend, is it foe, or is it irrelevant? So you have to do that very quick. So we're always drawn out by change through our senses, and our focus goes out into the world. And when our focus is out into the world, our focus is not inside on the inner world. It goes out. And we, when we're in our mother's body, there's no place to go. There's nothing to do. It's safe. Everything's taken care of. So our focus before birth in what I call the Buddha tank, the womb, is actually at rest inside, in its source, in life, and in awareness. So we're in the Buddha tank, nothing to do, hanging out. We don't even know we have a body, really. It's growing. We're not in charge of growing it, right? We have no words. We have no ideas. We have no culture. We have no religion. We don't belong to a nation. We don't even know who our mother is. We're not even breathing. We're not going pee or poo, right? So we're just hanging out for 9 months with our focus inside, kind of like where people want to go in deep meditation. So we are consummate meditators. We've done 9 months of uninterrupted meditation. We were present inside in our awareness, absent outside. But after we're born, because we have to get to know the world, drawn out by change, and we go from being present inside, absent outside. Now we go present outside, absent inside. And it is a journey of disconnection from ourselves in order to get connected and learn how the world works. So you could call that gaining the world and losing your soul. You could call it that. You don't have to, but you could call it that, right? And with that comes heartache. Heartache, even though it's usually triggered by a loss on the outside, heartache is our state of disconnection from ourselves that came from the natural process of our focus going outside and away from ourselves. That's where heartache begins. A lot of people say trauma causes heartache. It doesn't. Heartache is the natural process. Trauma triggers heartache. Because when something we've put our energy into and we want it to last forever, we want it to be something outside that always changes to be constant, and it doesn't work like that. When that ends, then we are triggered. We have lost our distraction, you could say, and now we're back to there's something missing. We've lost something. And it's the loss of our own connection to ourselves that is the cause of heartache, that is triggered. A reminder of that is triggered by the loss on the outside. And then what the masters did, they all said, there's something within you. So when all of this happened, by the way, that solar energy fraction, that is our life, that never went anywhere. It's only our focus shifted. So the only thing that has to change for us to get back to the Buddha state from the Buddha tank is we have to bring our focus back inside. Now, here's the problem. Going out is automatic for survival, but going in is not automatic because there's nothing in the core of your being that's going, look at me, I might eat you. You better assess whether I'm good or not. Nothing like that. No, it is actually all-encompassing peace and that unconditional love that is the energy, that is life. They're there all the time, still running the show, right? And so there's nothing there that says, you got to come back, you got to come back. Heartache is the disconnect, and the discontent comes from the disconnect, drives everything. That's why we're doing so much damage, because it comes out of discontent, and it comes out of a disconnection from ourselves. So our focus, bringing our focus back to our core, to our source, inside has to be deliberate, right? And heartache is the call to do some deliberate stillness practice that allows you to shut off what's outside. So you want to do it in a safe place. And you go to the heartache and you sit with the heartache because we don't like it. So we try not to do that. You sit with the heartache because that far, less than a hair's breadth behind your heartache is your wholeness. And every one of the 8 billion people on the planet is on that journey. First, the journey in the womb, then the journey into the world, then the heartache that comes from that, or the dissatisfaction, or the missing, or the striving, or the restless, or the emptiness. There's tons of words for it, but it's all the same feeling in our chest that's kind of uneasy, uncomfortable, little painful, grieving, sorrow, sadness, loss. Those are all words for what we feel in our chest because we were disconnected from ourselves. Every human being is on the path, and they're somewhere on the way out, or stuck out there, or in their heartache, or in their practice of deliberately finding their way back inside. When you find your way back inside, and you get good at it, you can literally sit down and be completely fulfilled and completely content and completely feel cared for and loved and inspired. And there's wisdom there, and your purpose is there. Everything that you want, that you try so hard to figure out, is not about figuring out, it's but to go where it already exists within you. And guess what? That's where the harmony lives too. What is the answer to it is literally 8 billion people get to understand the journey, and they get to understand it from people who have taken the journey. If you're out there and you're still trying to make your 60 billion bucks, right? And you're focused on making your 60 billion bucks, and you still think that if you make 60 billion bucks, you'll feel okay here. You won't. You'll feel okay here for about 3 days, and you say, yeah, I did it. And then that ache is back. Then the letdown is back. Then the depression comes back. Then something's still missing. It comes back, right? That's just the nature of us. And so then the project is to inspire people. First of all, the first project is I need to live there, right? Purpose 1 in my life is I was given this gift. It's an incredible gift. And it was given to me to personally enjoy, because you can't enjoy it for me, and I can't enjoy your gift for you. So if I don't enjoy the gift that I have, then it's a wasted gift. So purpose 1 is enjoy the gift. Be fully present in all of your being and your surroundings, not caught up in thoughts in your head, because that's what separates you from your magnificence, your awesomeness. So that's purpose 1. Now, what is purpose 2? Well, when I'm in that space, I feel so cared for that I literally, it's like, oh my God, it's not about me anymore. I am so cared for. It's amazing. And if I don't feel cared for, I know where to go to feel cared for. So this will never be about me again. So what is left to do when I feel completely cared for? Only one thing: to help. Where can I help? What needs to be done? How can I make the biggest splash for good that I can make in one body in the time that I have on this planet? That's the story.
Wow.
And every human being has that within them. And we are completely, for 200,000 years that we've been on this planet, we have been completely ignoring it. And we've had masters come and talk about it because they do their practice. They're connected inside. Our excuse is, well, Jesus was the Son of God and you're not. I'm just a sinner. Well, that's just an excuse. Because what he actually said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And he actually said you should first seek that and everything else will come together, right? And we're not doing that. So we claim to follow this guy, and we actually don't do anything that he recommended we do. And we have that same life energy, that same solar energy fraction in every human being. You could call that Christ. That is the Christ within you, but that is also the Buddha within you. And the truth is, that is the life within you. Same word, only life is not divisive, because we all know everywhere in the world we have that life, right? But Christ and Buddha and Krishna, that becomes divisive because then people start arguing because they're completely missing the point. They're saying, no, it wasn't Buddha, it was Jesus. No, it wasn't Jesus, it's Muhammad. No, it was, and then they start fighting with each other because they misunderstand what all of those people said about the nature of our existence and where our peace and where our love and where our inspiration and where our wholeness and where our oneness actually lives for each one of us on this planet.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible how you've articulated your journey, your story, and what you've discovered, and along the way, and how you synthesize all those ologies that you've studied into one message, essentially.
Yeah, and it was the same message that all the masters had.
Yeah, incredible. Right? And I'm just thinking from the listener's perspective, they're thinking, wow, just like me at the moment. But I'm going out, I've suffered a bit of heartbreak or trauma, and now it's time to go in. And that in itself is obviously a journey, right? That going within, discovering who you are. And have you got any tips for the listeners as to how they go within and find the true self?
Yeah, well, heartache, whatever you call that uncomfortable feeling, that's the greatest gift you've been given other than being alive. Now, we don't think of it that way. So we have to reframe that. When your heart aches, that's a gift you've been given. Just like pain is a gift because it tells you there's something you need to pay attention to and something you maybe need to do different, right? That's what pain is for. And it protects you because if you never felt pain, you would probably bang into things until your head bled out, right? So it's a gift. And heartache is the greatest gift because it's your call to come home inside to the awesome magnificence of your own existence. It's an invitation to come home, right? That's a gift. Now, that sounds strange, but not really. Hunger is a gift too, because hunger makes food and eating relevant. Thirst is a gift because it means water and drinking relevant. Tiredness is a gift because it makes bed and sleeping relevant, right? And heartache makes the journey to come back home to your oneness, to your wholeness, to the gift of your own life relevant. If there was no heartache, we would get spaced out into the world the way we do. We would never find our way back. So when you have heartache or you have trauma triggers heartache and that uneasy feeling is there, then we tend to distract ourselves from it or ignore it or deny it or try to explain it away or blame it on something or somebody. And I'm saying, no. You're completely missing. You're supposed to unwrap the gift, which means you sit with it and feel it. And it's uncomfortable and you might have some tears, but it's trying to talk to you. And so you sit in that heartache. That's your starting point for your journey home because that is your starting point. Because that's where you are. Because that thing dried up and this is your state. This is your state. This is not the fault of whatever stopped or whatever ended. Not the person, not the situation. This is your state. And you have to be willing to go to the starting point if you're going to make the journey home. You don't get a gold medal in a race if you're not willing to put your feet in the starting blocks. You know where the goal is, but you got to go to the starting point. You don't go to the goal the night before, right? And say, okay, I was there first, right? No, you have to run the race that is appointed to you. And the start for that race is the heartache. So you want to sit with heartache. You want to feel it, not judge it. Just feel it. Just be with it. Accept it. Acknowledge it. Maybe even be grateful for it because it's pulled you out of your head and out of your distractions. It's actually grounded you, made you simple, put you in the place where your focus needs to go. Okay? It's also your driving force, because as long as you're discontent, you will always try and figure out to do something to get to the contentment. It's also the starting point for that. And it's the call to come home. And once you have learned how to come home, then you're going to get sloppy again and you're going to drift again. And then the heartache will come back to remind you that you have every day. You need to deliberately bring your awareness back home to its source, where your rest, where your comfort is. So that's the key. The first one is you need to know that this feeling that you don't like is actually a huge gift that you have, because it's saving you from yourself. And then you sit with it. And then, like I said, less than a hair's breadth behind that ache is your wholeness, is the beauty. So what you basically need to do is your awareness goes out or focus goes out automatically. It doesn't go back inside automatically. So then you have to figure out, okay, well, how can I get a little bit deeper than the heartache? Because the heartache, the surface of it, how can I get a little deeper than that? And then you figure it out. And it's experimental. You can't do it with a formula. Everybody wants a formula. Formulas are only for the mind. You can't use a formula to get to the heart. It's experimental. It's experiential. If that doesn't work, try something else. Sit stiller, go deeper, stay longer. If it gets boring, notice how peaceful the boredom is, because you have to sit through your addiction to activity, because we're all addicted to doing, and we're supposed to be being. We're supposed to be human beings. We become human doings, right? And then if you get stuck and you try it and you try it and you try it and you can't, there's something still that you're not getting. You might have to spend some time with someone who lives in that space that will give you a contact high into that space, that might even show you a method to use that might make it a little easier. But the work is always going to be your own personal work. So I always say to people, try to do it on your own. And if you get to a point where one day I said, I know there's a perfection within me. And I sort of tapped my chest when I said it. I know that I'm not connected to it. And I need to find someone who can show me a step. And I had been trying to figure it out pretty much seriously for about 4 years. I mean, it was always there as a kid. Everybody's on that track, everybody's on that quest. We're just not getting good information about how to narrow down the track that we need to go to get there. And then we think it's money, or it's girls, or it's marriage, or it's kids, or it's one thing or another. And they're never quite do it. We can accommodate it and we can say it's okay to live that way. But then if we don't do that homework, the homework of coming home, then we deprive our kids of it too, because we don't model something for them that will be just as important for them in their life as it is in ours.
Is this something you mentor people with, or have you got a course that they can do, or is this something that you help, or do you guide them to? I'm
in the process of making a course of it, and and I can even tell people how I got there. I can hook him up with the guy who showed me that step that I was looking for. He didn't do my practice for me. He just showed me a way to make it a little quieter so that I get distracted a little less. And then after that, it's experiential, experimental. But you feel it, and sometimes I would sit down and do my practice. He calls it self-knowledge. That's a good name for it, right? I would do my practice for an hour, and I'd get up out of my practice, and I would say, I didn't experience anything. What a waste of time. But I would always know my day went better when I did the practice, even if I thought I never experienced anything. So it's interesting, that it's not always about, oh yeah, I didn't have an experience, so forget it, right? No, it's and every day, make some effort to come back home every day. I've been doing it for 50 years now.
Wow.
I was 30 when I started. And it was after this experience I had with the being of light, it started to become a memory. And I said, I want to live in that experience all the time on a moment-to-moment basis. How can you stay in that experience on a moment-to-moment basis? And that requires a deliberate, daily, committed practice. And it's like an exploration. Right? It's just like you start any other skill. The first time you do it, you're probably completely useless at it, and then you figure out, oh, no, that doesn't work. Oh, no, that doesn't work. Oh, I almost chopped myself in the knee. Oh, I better be a little more careful. Right? And you learn by doing, and you do it at a pace where you don't kill yourself, right? And then next thing you know, you could chop down trees and you can chop firewood. I'm very good at that. I can actually, it doesn't matter, you can bring me big block. There's a way to hit the block that you split it in one shot of the axe. And what you have to do is as the axe is coming down, just as it hits, you have to turn it sideways, because all that downward energy is going this way, right? But that takes precision timing, because if you do it too early, you're just going to hit the block with the side of your axe. If you do it too late, then the axe bites into the wood and you can't turn it. So you have to do just at the place where it's just touched, and then you turn it. And if you get good at that, talk about precision. You think it's like the block is a ways away from you. You're doing it with an axe, that's not part of the axe doesn't feel anything, right? So to do that, you have to be very precise, very focused. And if you had that kind of focus in the core of your being, you would be in the experience, not the presence of a master outside, but you would be in the experience of the master inside. And you would feel so loved and so grateful and so inspired and so lit up that you're, oh my God, I had no idea that such a thing was possible for a mere human being. And it's possible for everyone who's alive.
And so for the listeners that are really keen to find their master within them, and they're essentially going through a process, they are listening to the cues such as the pain or the heartbreak, and they're thinking it's time to go within, and they're sort of getting a bit lost in that journey to go within and distracted, as you said. How can they best connect with you for your pending course?
theudo.com, theudo.com, or udoerasmus.com. So that's my other website. I do some psychological stuff there and all the human nature stuff and the total health picture. The Udo's Choice is about the products, and this is about the education. So I'm working on it. I did about 25 pages on it last night. And I get on a roll, and then I was up till 2:30 in the morning because it was just flowing, and when it flows, and the structure builds itself, it's really quite, so and it's honestly, of all the things I do, oil is important. It's the most neglected area of nutrition, but this is the most neglected area of human nature. And if we don't get this together, we're basically going to destroy ourselves. And I don't think I'm being dramatic. I think we know things that have happened in the last few years, whether it's government overreach or whether it's industry overreach or whether it's corruption in high and low places. We're at a place, we're destroying the planet, and we depend on the planet. Every plant makes oxygen for me to breathe, even poison ivy and even the weeds. But we always, we are part of a system. We need to live within that system with respect and with care and with appreciation. You aren't going to have that for the world if you don't have it for yourself. So it really starts at home. When our sense of self changes, when I go from anger or fear to love, I live differently into the world, because your state of being comes to expression in your thoughts, your words, your actions, and the consequences of those. So we need to become lovers instead of killers. We need to go from greedy killers to grateful gardeners. That was one way to describe it, right? And it's within us to do that, but we have to come home to discover, oh my God, this is so incredible. To be alive is such a gift. I was talking to somebody today, and I walked by, and I make comments to people, strangers, when I go by sometimes, and I said, you look like Socrates. So he's standing very still, and I said, yeah, he used to go for walks, and then he'd just stop and stand still, and then he would become incommunicative, and he would be probably tripping on something philosophical, right? He says, I'm definitely not like Socrates. I want to kill myself. And so we got into a 1-hour conversation. He had some problem with his leg. He's a lawyer, being a professor, and he has this problem with his leg that makes it hard to walk. You couldn't see any of it, but he had pain. I'm sure he had pain. And so he wanted to kill himself because he had pain in his knee. And so we started talking. I said, there's a light within you. You need to find that light. So then he wanted to know if Jesus had sent me. And I said, not exactly. But there he was, contemplating, and he said, I'm afraid of dying, so that's why I haven't killed myself. And, he'll always have the choice to do that. But, oh my God, what a waste to live your life and have never experienced how incredible it is and how small the pain is in comparison to, but we're in a place where we're not getting as much support from the outside as we used to. So we need to find more support from the inside. And I went through what we're heading for already in the Second World War. I had to find that support on the inside because I didn't have it on the outside. And oh my God, how incredible is that there is that support, that no matter how dark it gets on the outside, you are the light in that darkness, at least for you. And maybe if you're in touch with that enough, you can maybe help other people find their light. Don't not be their light, but find their light. Because ultimately we all need to find that light within ourselves. And then we can follow the same leader, life being the leader, 8 billion people. And if you have questions, you ask life, right? There's your expert living inside of you, your leader living inside of you, your CEO living inside of you, your master living inside of you, your benevolent dictator living inside of you. And you have access to that if you've learned how to do that. And you will always be the person who can make the best decision in your trench. You know, we have a guy in Canada. He lives about 3,000 miles from me. We call him the Prime Minister. Just not different from Australia, right? And so he's supposed to be the guy who tells me what's good for me. He doesn't even know what I got going on. He can't even do it for his own family, really, because everybody's motor and everybody's life is inside of them. And if we tap into that life, we could literally 8 billion people could be following the same leader, living in love, living in peace. And there's the harmony.
Absolutely. And I can see that you've found your light because you're certainly helping others discover their light. As you just
that's always the hope. You know, I can't make anybody do it. I can be, and I love to be an influence in that direction. You know, is this a possibility? Is this a possibility, you know, for anyone who listens and watches? Is this a possibility for you? And what would you need to do in order to be fully present in all of your being and your surroundings and not lost in thoughts in your head, right?
Absolutely. All that wisdom, you can see that you're living what you share with others. You can see it in terms of your vitality in your 80s. So you're running rings around a lot of younger people, even some people in their 40s.
I'm running rings around myself in my 40s too, just so you know, because it's from more practice, right? But start now. You've been given this incredible gift. Why waste it? Why get into the darkness when you could shine light? You know, paranoid people. You know why people are paranoid?
Why? Because
they see the darkness encroaching and they're not in touch with the light that makes the darkness go away. So if you have concerns about all the things that are going on, you're focusing on all that's supposed to go wrong, that could go wrong from everybody coming at you. And you need to be focused on the light that you are, that shines into all of that and makes the darkness go away. And you might be able to convince the people who are bringing the darkness to also get in touch with their light, because that's the job. That's the job for humanity in this century. And this is a really good year to start.
Absolutely.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too, Udo. I really appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom with the listeners and helping them discover their light so that they can in turn over time help others discover their light and help this world thrive instead of just survive. So
or crash.
Yeah. I think the great work you're doing is certainly going to take us a direction where we thrive as opposed to crash. So
that's the hope.
I really appreciate your time. And for the listeners, if you've really got a lot out of this episode, and I'm surely you have, because I have myself, please share it with others. The more people we can get this episode out to, the more we can share Udo's wisdom around helping them discover their light and their true self, so that they can live a life that they've been brought here to live, as opposed to someone trying to live someone else's life or someone else's world, or trying to live in a one-sided world or see the world one-sided. So please share it with others. And Udo, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. You know, if the message is a good message, you need to take credit for being the amplifier, right? Otherwise, I'd be just in the bath talking to myself in the bathroom mirror, which is debatable as a life purpose.
Absolutely. I am your amplifier. And this is going to be shared across the podcast, across YouTube, Facebook, socials. You'll even find yourself on TikTok, Udo. So it's going to be in a good way.
Hey, whatever, you know, it's like whatever, wherever it goes, if it's a good message, it's a good message.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing the message, because I certainly have gained a lot of wisdom out of your message today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, me&my Health disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of me&my Health.